I never thought I'd be the woman who'd discover her husband was cheating, but here we are, and it's a nightmare I can't wake up from. Tom and I had been together for 7 years, married for 3, and while things had their ups and downs like any relationship, I genuinely believed we had something special. Sure, there were the usual disagreements over chores and his tendency to leave his socks everywhere, but nothing that screamed trouble. But looking back now, I see the subtle signs I ignored. It started with his late nights at work. Initially, I brushed it off as just the demands of his job in marketing, where the deadlines can get intense. He'd come home exhausted, often skipping dinner, and I'd feel guilty for wanting his company when he clearly needed rest. I should have noticed how much he started to prioritize work over us. Then there were the sudden interest shifts. He bought new cologne, and it wasn't the scent he usually wore. I thought, oh, maybe he's just trying to impress me? How naive I was. It wasn't until a few months later, while organizing our filing cabinet, that the first real red flag popped up. I found a receipt for a hotel stay, one that I hadn't booked, and that was dated a week after our anniversary. My heart dropped as I held that piece of paper like it was a ticking bomb. I confronted him about it casually, trying to keep my cool. Hey, I found this receipt. Was there a mix-up? He brushed it off, claiming it was a business trip he had forgotten to tell me about, insisting it was a seminar. Still, the nagging feeling grew. I started paying closer attention. I noticed his phone had become a fortress. He never left it unattended anymore, and when he was on it, he'd often step outside or turn away like I was a threat. One Saturday, I was out running errands, and my friend Claire called to chat. Mid-conversation, she casually mentioned she'd bumped into Tom at a bar 2 nights before. She said he was out with a work buddy. My stomach twisted. I knew he wasn't at some networking event, but rather hiding something deeper. The next day, I found myself at that bar, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I needed to see for myself. As I walked in, the familiar smells of beer and popcorn hit me, and I scanned the room. There it was, cozying up to a woman I'd never seen before, the two of them laughing like there was no tomorrow. I thought my heart would shatter right then. When I confronted him that evening, I was a storm of emotions, shock, anger, and heartbreak swirling within me. "Who is she?" I yelled, standing firm in front of him as he fumbled for words. His initial reaction was defensive, spinning tales of just friends and nothing serious. But the way he avoided my gaze told me everything I needed to know. With every lie he tried to weave, my disbelief morphed into a deep, painful realization that the man I loved was a stranger. I could feel the walls pressing in on me as I processed the betrayal. "How long?" I asked, my voice cracking. "How long have you been lying?" His response came in hesitant breaths, vague timelines that only made the hurt grow sharper. He eventually admitted to a few months of deceit, saying he didn't want to hurt me and that he was my everything. Those words felt like salt in a festering wound. He was my everything, yet he had shattered everything we built together. The emotional fallout was a whirlwind. I felt my identity slipping away. Was I the naive wife, the blind partner? I spent nights tossing and turning, replaying moments in my mind, wondering if I had missed every sign along the way. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support. I decided to leave him, a choice that felt both liberating and devastating. We filed for divorce, and the finality of it all hit me like a freight train. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing, leaning on loved ones and rediscovering who I was outside of the relationship. I took up painting again, something I had neglected in the chaos of our life. I immersed myself in self-care, seeking therapy to navigate the emotional labyrinth that infidelity left behind. Looking back now, I realize how important it is to trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't hesitate to investigate. It's better to face an uncomfortable truth than to live a lie. Healing takes time, but it's possible to emerge stronger on the other side. I'm still on that journey, but I'm learning to love myself again, piece by piece. So to anyone reading this, trust your gut, seek clarity, and know that you are worthy of love that is honest and true. Don't settle for less.
I never thought I'd be the one telling a story like this, but here we are. My husband's affair was uncovered not by texts or pictures, but through a series of seemingly innocent moments that spiraled into a full-blown revelation. We were married for 7 years, a seemingly perfect couple in our mid-30s, both working professionals with dreams and plans for a great future. At first, everything felt perfect, and the love we had promised each other felt unbreakable. But as the months turned into years, I began to notice subtle changes in him. It started with the small things. He began taking longer work meetings that often left me alone with my thoughts. I'd cook dinner while he'd slip into the other room for hours, claiming he was deep in discussions with clients. I brushed off the unease, convincing myself he was simply busy. Then came the odd work-related dinners that seemed to crop up out of nowhere. It was one thing after another. Each time I would ask to join, I was met with, "It's just a team thing, nothing special." It was so rational, so convincing. But the first real red flag came on a Wednesday evening when I walked into our home, and instead of the familiar smell of his favorite cooking spices, there was a lingering floral scent that wasn't mine. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he had bought something for me. But as the week went on, the scent persisted. I confronted him about it, and he laughed, saying he had just started using a new deodorant and teased me about being overly sensitive. I tried to shake off the gnawing feeling. Then came the odd work-related dinners that seemed to crop up out of nowhere. It was one thing after another. Each time I would ask to join, I was met with, "It's just a team thing, nothing special." It was so rational, so convincing. But the first real red flag came on a Wednesday evening when I walked into our home, and instead of the familiar smell of his favorite cooking spices, there was a lingering floral scent that wasn't mine. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he had bought something for me. But as the week went on, the scent persisted. I confronted him about it, and he laughed, saying he had just started using a new deodorant and teased me about being overly sensitive. I tried to shake off the gnawing feeling. Then there were the financial discrepancies. I was balancing our budget one day when I noticed an unusual charge for dinner at a restaurant I knew he didn't like. I asked him about it, and he shrugged it off, giving me a half-hearted explanation about a work outing, but something felt off. The night he returned home late, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being gaslighted. A week later, during a friend's party, I overheard a conversation that would change everything. I was chatting with one of his colleagues when she mentioned, almost offhandedly, how surprised she was to see him with that girl at the coffee shop last Tuesday. My stomach sank as she described how cozy they looked together. I felt the world tilt beneath me and disbelief washed over me. How could he do this? I knew I had to confront him, but I needed proof. I started paying closer attention to his routines. His phone had suddenly become a fortress, and he would leave the room whenever a notification chimed. I decided to reach out to our mutual friends, and they reluctantly revealed more unsettling details. He had been spending more time working than he had ever mentioned, and some of them had seen him out with another woman, someone I didn't know. Each piece of information felt like a dagger. The discovery culminated one fateful evening when he came home late again. I had decided to confront him, my heart pounding in my chest as I laid the evidence before him. As I recounted the conversations I had had, the reactions of our friends, and the inconsistency in his stories, he became defensive, insisting I was overreacting, that I was imagining things. When I pushed further, he finally stammered the words that shattered me. "It's not what you think." I felt a mix of shock and anger as he tried to manipulate the conversation, flipping it back on me, claiming I had been distant and that I was the one pushing him away. In my disbelief, I felt the walls closing in. I wanted to scream, to shake him and demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, stunned into silence. After what felt like an eternity, he admitted to the affair, though he tried to downplay it as something trivial, a mistake that meant nothing. I could barely process his words, heartbroken and angry all at once. I felt small and betrayed, questioning every moment, every memory I had of us. The pain was raw, and I knew in that moment that the life I had built was crumbling around me. In the days that followed, I felt lost. Friends reached out, some supportive, some judgmental, but I needed time to figure out what I wanted. I ultimately chose to separate, realizing I deserved more than empty apologies. The divorce process was painful, filled with moments of reflected hurt and intense self-doubt. Would I ever be able to trust again? As I look back now, I realize how important it is to listen to your intuition. The signs were all along, masked in his reassurances and my own desire to believe in our love. My heart aches for all the moments I now view through a new lens. But I've learned resilience through this painful journey. To anyone reading this, trust yourself. Feel the emotions, but don't let someone else's betrayal define your worth. You are stronger than you think, and there is a beautiful life waiting to be rebuilt brick by brick.
I never thought I'd be the one to find out my husband was cheating, but here I am, shattered and still processing the chaos. We had been together for 8 years, a beautiful whirlwind of love and laughter that seemed unbreakable. At least that's what I told myself. The first red flags were subtle, almost imperceptible. He started working late more often, but I assumed it was just the demands of his job and marketing. Then there were moments when he'd glance at his phone with a nervous quickness that felt out of place. I brushed it off as stress from his deadlines, telling myself I was being paranoid. But something shifted more dramatically when his best friend, Mark, casually mentioned at a barbecue how it was nice to see Jay so happy lately. The way he said it made my heart drop, a prickly sensation crawling at my spine. When I confronted Jay about it later that night, he laughed it off, saying Mark just meant he was busy with work. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. The following weeks were riddled with inconsistencies. One evening, I found a receipt tucked away in his gym bag for a restaurant I'd never heard of, dated on a day he claimed he was stuck in meetings. I Googled the place, and it had a romantic atmosphere. My heart raced as I thought about the possibility of him sharing a meal with someone else. I kept my composure, wanting to avoid a confrontation based on mere suspicion. I needed proof, something concrete that I couldn't dismiss as wild imagination. Then came the smell. It struck me one night, as he walked in the door, an unfamiliar fragrance lingering on his clothes, something floral and sweet that wasn't his usual cologne. I tried to convince myself it was just a new detergent or something he'd picked up at the gym, but my mind spiraled into darker territories. I couldn't help but remember how he had recently stopped letting me pick out his clothes for work, opting for more trendy styles that didn't seem to fit him. It was as if he was trying to impress someone else. I decided to gather my courage and talk to my friend Sarah, someone I trusted completely. When I mentioned the receipt, Sarah suggested I reach out to a mutual friend who worked at the restaurant to see if he had made any reservations. I hesitated, feeling like a spy in my own life, but I needed clarity. A few days later, the friend confirmed that Jay had dined there with a woman just last week. My heart shattered in slow motion as the realization set in. I had been right all along. Confronting him was a blur of emotions. I confronted him on a Sunday afternoon when he seemed relaxed, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. "We need to talk about your late nights," I said, my voice trembling. He looked up, visibly startled, but his expression quickly morphed into defensiveness. "What do you mean? You're just being paranoid." I laid out everything, the receipts, the comments, the smell, each piece of evidence tearing at the facade we had built. Rather than confess, he shifted blame, accusing me of not being supportive enough. "Maybe if you paid attention more, I wouldn't feel so distant," he said, twisting the knife deeper. The audacity of his words sent me spiraling. I felt disbelief, anger, and heartbreak flood my system, mixing into a toxic cocktail of despair. After what felt like In eternity of back and forth accusations, he finally confessed, but only when he could no longer deny the weight of the evidence. Okay, I've been seeing someone," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The air felt thick as I absorbed his admission, and I suddenly felt so small, so betrayed. Deep down, the self-doubt crept in. What was wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? In the days that followed, the emotional fallout was suffocating. I vacillated between rage and overwhelming sadness, replaying every moment, every laugh, every intimate connection we had shared, now tainted by his betrayal. I knew I should leave, but part of me still clung to the hope of recovery. We tried to work it out for about a week, but every attempt felt hollow, like slapping a Band-Aid on a wound that needed stitches. Eventually, I made the decision to separate. I realized that no amount of love could fix the shards of trust he shattered. I packed my things, leaving behind memories mixed with pain. The divorce process was exhausting, but liberating in a way I never anticipated. I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. Looking back now, I realized that the signs were there, I just didn't want to see them. My advice for anyone who feels that nagging sensation in their gut is to trust it. Don't ignore the red flags or make excuses. You deserve honesty and respect. I'm still healing, but I've learned to love myself fiercely, and that's the most important lesson I could take away from this experience.